Welcome to the Global Issues Daily. Let's dive right into what we call the Gibraltar Enigma. If you pull up a map of the world, your eyes are almost instantly drawn to this critical, tiny geographical pinch point, the Strait of Gibraltar. It's literally just a 14-kilometer gap separating the massive landmasses of Europe and Africa. Think about that. Humanity has conquered towering mountains, we've drilled deep beneath the oceans, we're building cities in the sky, yet this absolutely vital corridor remains totally unbridged. In this explainer, we're going to figure out why. Why, after over a century of blueprints and billions of dollars in research, does connecting these two continents remain one of the greatest unfulfilled engineering dreams on Earth? To wrap our heads around this mystery, we've broken it down into 5 key parts: the 14-kilometer illusion, a century of dreams, the ocean's fury, the engineering abyss, and finally, the geopolitical chasm. Let's get right into it. Part 1, the 14-kilometer illusion. If you ever stand in Spain at the Mirador del Estrecho's scenic viewpoint, you can clearly see the imposing Jebel Musa mountain right across the water in Morocco. It looks so close. At its narrowest, this gap is roughly the distance between a city center and its suburbs. I mean, without traffic, that's just a 30-minute drive. It presents a seriously tantalizing prospect, doesn't it? A physical connection right here would fundamentally rewrite global economics. This strategic choke point is already massive. It handles an astounding 100,000 ships and 18,000 oil tankers every single year. To put that into perspective, that's 33% of all global oil and gas, half of all global maritime trade, and a staggering 80% of the European Union's merchandise trade. We're talking about everything from electronics to raw materials flowing right through this tiny artery. A bridge? Well, a bridge would revolutionize global supply chains literally overnight. And that brings us to a striking paradox. You know, humanity isn't exactly short on engineering miracles. China built the massive Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge in just 9 years. The 50-kilometer channel tunnel connecting the UK and France, that was bored in just 6 years. We even conquered the impenetrable Swiss Alps with the 57-kilometer Goddard-based train tunnel. The capital is there, the engineering brilliance is there, so why does bridging this tiny 14-kilometer gap remain so impossible? Let's look at part 2, a century of dreams. You see, the ambition to connect these continents isn't just some modern idea. It actually dates back to the early 20th century. And honestly, some of those early proposals bordered straight on science fiction. Get a load at this. Back in 1920, a German architect named Hermann Cirkel proposed something called Atlantropa, his audacious solution. He wanted to literally dam the Strait of Gibraltar to lower the entire Mediterranean Sea by 660 feet. The idea was to reclaim massive tracts of land and physically merge Europe and Africa into one supercontinent. Shipping traffic with the Red Sea would thus be handled by some expanded Suez Canal locks. But, as you might guess, the unimaginable cost of building 7 huge dams, the absolute catastrophic environmental threat to the Mediterranean ecosystem, and Cirkel's eventual death in 1952 pretty much sealed the fate of that wild project. Okay, so skipping ahead to the late 1970s, ambitions finally shifted from sci-fi back to reality. Following Spain's transition to democracy, King Juan Carlos I and Morocco's King Hassan II actually signed a historic pact in 1979 to pursue a crossing. They set up dedicated public research companies, say Segra in Spain and Essenad in Morocco. Fast forward to 1991, and they are launching serious geological investigations, even sending a research vessel named the Nautilus to drill right into the ocean floor. The dream was slowly but surely becoming a concrete plan. Which leads us to part 3, the ocean's fury. Because, as those survey ships very quickly discovered, drafting a bridge in a cozy boardroom doesn't exactly prepare engineers for the brutal physical reality of the strait. The surface itself is a violently unforgiving environment. You see, the strait is essentially a massive hydrodynamic choke point. You've got warm, lighter Mediterranean waters violently colliding with dense, cold meltwater rushing in from the Atlantic. This intense collision triggers convection currents known as upwelling. Add in surface currents moving at 11 kilometers per hour, and absolutely brutal 108 kilometer per hour winds, and the strait becomes a churning cauldron. Back in the 1990s, the sheer vibration from these currents was literally snapping solid titanium drill rods. It was so intense that survey ships like the Polars couldn't even manage to drop an anchor. So that brings us to part 4, the engineering abyss. Because if the surface is treacherous, wait until you hear about the subsurface. The geological makeup of that shortest 14-kilometer path, which experts call the canyon route, completely shattered all conventional engineering models. Trying to bypass that awful seafloor entirely, an American architect named Eugene Suey proposed a radical $10 billion floating bridge. This wasn't your average bridge. It featured a 2-mile underwater tunnel that emerged into a massive 3-mile artificial floating city center. It was engineered with a flexible fish spine made of electrolytic concrete and aluminum, designed specifically to absorb all that intense kinetic energy from the ocean. It's a brilliant concept, but the $10 billion price tag, compounded by some terrifying new geological data we're about to discuss, basically sank the idea before it ever floated. Here's the thing, standard tunneling methods completely useless here. Let's compare it to the English Channel. The channel has a sturdy chalk seabed at a maximum depth of just 180 meters, which is basically perfect for drilling. But the Straits Canyon route, it plunges 900 meters deep. That's the equivalent of stacking 3 Eiffel Towers underwater. And worse, the seafloor isn't even solid rock. It's made of breccia, which is this highly porous, fundamentally weak mix of clay and stone. So researchers identified 5, frankly lethal factors that make this 14-kilometer route mathematically impossible to bridge. No. 1, those 900-meter depths demand impossibly massive pillars. Number 2, that weak breccia clay risks immediate structural collapse the second you start drilling. 3, there's impenetrable rock lying just beneath that clay that destroys modern drill bits. 4, the strait sits directly on top of an active tectonic fault line between the Eurasian and African plates, literally the exact friction point that caused the deadly Lisbon earthquake. And finally, number 5, international maritime law requires a minimum 70-meter clearance above the water for massive cargo ships and aircraft carriers to pass safely. It's just an engineering nightmare. Faced with this literal engineering abyss, authorities had to pivot in 2005. A deep-sea survey vessel was scanning the area and actually discovered what's known as the threshold route further to the west. Now, it's twice as long, at 28 kilometers, but, and this is a huge but, it is crucially only 300 meters deep. The treacherous clay layers are also significantly shallower there. For the first time, engineers had a genuine glimmer of technical feasibility. By 2006, a truly viable blueprint emerged. A Swiss firm, Lombardi Engineering, was actually awarded the tender to construct a massive underground railway system straight across that 28-kilometer threshold route. The plan utilized a 3-tunnel system, 1 for service and 2 for railways. It was designed to cut travel time between Casablanca and Madrid from a grueling 12 hours down to just 5.5. It was poised to absolutely supercharge intercontinental trade. And that brings us to part 5, the geopolitical chasm. Because with the engineering hurdles seemingly cleared and work actually slated to begin by 2008, the project slammed into its final and arguably most insurmountable barrier, human politics. You see, the diplomatic relationship between these two nations is incredibly fragile. Even though Spain granted Morocco independence back in 1956, Spain still retains control of Ceuta and Melilla, which are 2 strategic enclaves right on the Moroccan coast. In 2008, just as the tunnel project was getting ready to launch, a Spanish royal visit to these contested territories caused Morocco to withdraw its ambassador. That move froze the multi-billion-dollar project instantly. And a very similar diplomatic fallout happened again in 2020 over the medical treatment of a Western Sahara rebel leader, which halted progress all over again. So today, the connection remains stuck in a tense state of limbo. Yet the stakes for international commerce are so incredibly profound that global powers, we're talking the US, the UK, China, India, and the European Union, are actively lobbying both nations. They all recognize that securing this critical artery isn't just a local issue. It's absolutely essential for the stability and growth of the broader global economy. As this explainer reveals, overcoming the wrath of the ocean, the crushing depths of the geological abyss, and the seismic threat of tectonic plates is actually, technically, within our grasp right now. But this monumental 8th wonder of the world will only materialize when Spain and Morocco can finally build a bridge of trust over their deep historical divides. In an era where we can engineer our way out of almost any physical barrier on the planet, will human geopolitics be the only force keeping Europe and Africa forever apart? Thank you for watching this Explorer. If you found this analysis insightful, be sure to like and subscribe to the Global Issues Daily for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.